somebody in the Ministry of whatever will read this and see what we've done in terms of trying to analyze our problems. For example, nobody thinks, for instance, about what is happening with agriculture. I mean, for instance, we're going to be fed, more or less, by Europe and America, the way things are going, because all the genetic things, producing new seeds and so on, and selling to us. And our own native varieties are disappearing. This is a real issue. It's not something that, one has. Just as an example of where you can have a policy, action, taken. So let me just stop there.
Well, as you just noticed, of course, the diagnostician, the one who diagnosed the human condition in Africa, Professor Irela Abiola, is not new to my audience anymore. Acedon, in the past, had devoted an entire hour interviewing him at the literary giant of Francophone Africa. Now, the speaker who would be following him is Professor Jayifo, whom many identify as BJ. And his thesis, his central thesis, that again I read from what I wrote in the introduction to my piece, where I say, Bioden Jayifo pushes Fanon's vision to embrace Amilcar Cabral's revolutionary quest for cultural modernity that can accommodate the complex history of African nationalities, ethnicities, and languages. The continent's future is poignantly portrayed in the narratives of Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe. Jayifo collects the scattered insights of Achebe's political and literary interventions into one systematic whole in which culture is viewed in the spirit of Cabral as a kernel of appropriation and transcendence, blending resistance and creativity. So the next figure whom you'll be meeting is BJ, Professor Jayifo of Harvard University. Enjoy his contributions.
Okay, then I happened to be out of the country. I was in Nigeria, and I went and dug up my old files and saw a lot of talks I had given, so I picked one of them and did a very quick, work on the piece, and that's what appears now. Actually, it's about what has appeared in the issue is about half of the length of the original. And and let me speak a little about the half that's missing, and then I'll speak very briefly about what I actually say. The half that's missing is an old argument that has it was more prevalent and very intense in the 70s and 80s, but it hasn't died out completely. It's what I will call something like an African exceptionalism, the presumed African exceptionalism in the question of nation and class. That's basically the view that class formation is so embryonic in Africa that it is not a worthwhile category of analysis and interpretation. And I have argued persistently against that. That's why I say, there is no, to move from the quite valid observation, historical observation, that class formation is still kind of incipient compared with most of the other regions of the world. To move from that and then to erect it as a kind of exceptionalism, which therefore trumps class, is something that that I argue with. So, in fact, my first published book, well, second published book, The Truthful Lie, all of the essays in that book are around the subject of the pertinence of class, apart from race and ethnicity in analyzing African literary texts. And so that's one half that's missing. We just had to communicate. The half that's present now, therefore, deals more with race. But if you notice from what I say about the debates around class, in fact, it is a kind of reification of race. That because of the present crisis, and I am very much alarmed by this, that there is now, even for those who are not conscious of it, a kind of giving racial explanations for Africa's problems. And I'm very, very perturbed by this. I keep getting, for instance, I don't know if you have, I've been getting some emails from Chinwezu recently.
Yes, yes, yes.
And he's amassing material, and which in terms of just looking at one side of historical material, historical evidence, is unassailable about the enslavement and the domination of Arab North Africa on sub-Saharan Africa on one hand, and Western European, racism on Africa. It gives up the comparative, and that's just one, and it's, and it circulates very widely. So in my essay, I trace the way that Chinua Achebe, more problematically, but also quite productively, has dealt with this, what I call this reification of race. Race as a kind of explanation. It's either race as as the source of explanation for Africa's problems and crises, or on the flip side, race as the source of resolving these problems and kind of racial solidarity, kind of racial, what I call following a non-racialization of thought. And I explore how in three different moments or three different expressions, Chinua Achebe, Frantz Fanon, and Amilcar Cabral attend to this reification of race and demythologize it, demystify it. The case of Achebe is very interesting because on one hand, he's kind of trapped in it. But also, if you read many of his non-fictional observations, he has a kind of progressivist, linear, teleological view. That, however, if you read his fictional works, it's far more complex. In fact, there's a kind of deconstruction, kind of very interesting and very powerful demythologization of that view. And of course, with Fanon and Cabral, there's a full-scale, incredibly rich, theoretical, exploration of this problem. And I'll end with the case of Cabral. Cabral, I think, is perhaps the most underappreciated, thinker that we produce on the African continent. And every class, every opportunity I say, please read Cabral. Please read Cabral, because especially if two essays in the English translation of all this, there are a couple of translations in English of his writings, but the prominent one, the better well-known one, is the one called collection of essays on unity and struggle. There are two essays there, one on the weapon of culture, the second one on national culture. Absolutely crucial and vital. It's in the Marxist tradition, but it is not. It is Marxism, used with extraordinary creativity and inventiveness in application to the African situation. So that's why I say in the essay I talk of. The title is An African Cultural Modernity, Achebe, and Cabral, and the philosophy of decolonization.
Well, as you just noticed, and I'm sure you're as thrilled as I was, we witnessed the literary power of J.F. of Harvard University, who is using the novel